We're in a long series through the book of Luke, and we talk about faith a lot in the gospel. And so for the next 4 weeks, because the text demands us, we're going to be covering, in fact, the whole of chapter 7 is a chapter about faith. And so we're going to be looking at, for the next couple of weeks, it's about 4 weeks or so, we're going to be looking at this issue of faith. What is it? Now, what is interesting when you start looking at this issue is that everyone has faith. In fact, I'm going to argue that faith is absolutely essential to human existence. There is no possibility of making sense of the world, actually seeing the world, without faith. What do I mean? Well, if you look at any situation, anything that you go into, you are filtering it. You are not looking at that thing objectively. In fact, my research this week led me down a very long rabbit hole that I got lost in and wasted a lot of time in looking at artificial intelligence. And one of the main crises they have with artificial intelligence is the issue of what do you prioritize? You can't take in all the information. It's too much. And so human beings reduce the world down to simple statements, simple rationalizations that are essentially moral objective views. Another way to put this, faith. You don't have all the answers. In fact, it was Thomas Kuhn, a famous scientist from the 1960s, who made this statement. And I'll admit, it has been challenged a couple of times since he wrote it, and it is, by my all means, an oversimplification of what I'm sharing with you tonight. But he illustrates, and it's a great kind of statement, that no scientific discovery is linear. We like to think of science as like some guy discovered something, another guy took his work and like progressed it a little bit, and there we have something new. And the science is ever, the word evolving, ever adapting, ever correcting itself. It's rubbish. Science, Thomas Kuhn put it differently. He says, no, science always takes quantum leaps. So the majority of science is done through and in consensus. People take the views of the world and they look at the data through that view. There's no other way to do it. Until someone looks at the data and says, hang on, the data doesn't line up with the consensus. And then a revolution happens. A good example of this is Copernicus. Copernicus looked at the stars and he saw their movement, and the whole world was saying the world is geocentric. The universe is geocentric. The earth is at the center of the universe. Everyone was saying it. Everyone's like, yeah, totally, that makes sense. And a whole bunch of mathematicians are working and like, it doesn't really make sense, but it's consensus. Who's going to question consensus? Copernicus comes along and he's like, no, this doesn't make sense. And so he made more and more data analyses until he realized that in fact the sun is the center of our solar system. It is heliocentric. And so a revolution happens. And that is constantly happening in science. Newton upended the modern age. From Newton, Einstein completely decimated Newton's presuppositions. Hawking's completely upended Einstein's definitions, and so on and so forth. And what I'm trying to illustrate to you tonight is we cannot but look at the world. We cannot make sense of the world without trust, without faith, without presuppositions. That's the reality of who you are. You are a presuppositional being. Now, the issue of what we're going to be looking at is most of our low-resolution views of the world, our faith presuppositions, are wrong. And so we need to get into a place where we understand and make sense of the world from a place of truth. And that's what we're going to look at tonight. What Jesus identifies as great faith, or good faith. What is a good basis or reality of life? And we get this from the text that we're looking at, which is Luke chapter 7, verses 1 to 10. Let's read together. So Luke chapter 7, verses 1 to 7. When Jesus has finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. There a centurion servant who his master valued highly was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with him. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to him, saying, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. This is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. Tell this one, go, and he goes. Tell this one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does this." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith, even in Israel." Then the man who had sent returned to the house and found the servant well. May the Lord bless the reading of his word tonight. So, Jesus is in fact illustrating to us a great faith, something on which to build our lives upon. And you will notice there's three things that we will see that Jesus highlights of a great faith. First, we see the goodness of faith. Secondly, the object of faith. And thirdly, the boldness of faith. That's how Jesus outlines it, and that's how we're going to follow it. So let's look at the goodness of faith, or goodness of great faith. In the text, we read how the Jewish elders came to Jesus to show that Jesus, this guy is good. The centurion is a good man. Notice what they say. "This man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and built our synagogue." So we can say from the text that this man was at least generous and loved Israel, and probably loved Israel's God. He esteemed the Israel nation. And so the Israelite people, the elders of the Israelite people, come to Jesus and they're like, plead with him, "Lord, he deserves this." Now I want to make a suggestion. I would say that is probably the majority of people's worldviews, people's faith, is people get what they deserve. Good people get good things. Live a good life, just work hard, We can pick this up whenever you hear someone say they go through bad things and they're like, "What did I do to deserve this?" Right? Notice what the grounding of their life is. It's this idea that if you're good things happen to me. A more religious way to put this would be, I just can't believe a God who would allow this to happen to such a good person. Do you notice the assumption? Do you notice the low-resolution view of the world that person is bringing? Good people deserve good things. Good people deserve good things. Now notice, that's a faith statement. It's a faith statement. It's what people ground their lives on. And Jesus is saying that's rubbish. The text is showing us that this is not a good way to view the world. How does the centurion respond? On hearing Jesus is coming to him, he sends out his friend and said, "Lord, don't trouble yourselves." What's the next verse? What's the next statement in verse 6? "For I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. This is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you." Notice his faith, his grounding of his life. I am not worthy. Great faith, church, starts with an honest valuation of self, which is that we all fall short of being good. Every single one of us. It's honest. This is the irony of people saying, good people deserve good things. It's ignorant of your own self. Because if you're really honest with yourself, we don't measure up. We're always falling short of perfection. We're always falling short of what is good. I mean, just to put it simply, I'm really going to way bottom it out. Do you need to improve right now? Is anyone here you've arrived? No more self-improvement. So isn't that an honest valuation? Jesus is saying, recognize that. Understand that a good faith, a good way to understand the world is maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. Great faith starts with an honest view of self, realizing that we do not measure up to perfection. In fact, our goodness, if there is any of it, lies outside of ourselves. And I would go beyond the text to say it lies in God alone. So that's the first thing. The goodness of faith is where? In God and God alone. There is no good people but God. I mean, there's another text we can lead to when a Pharisee comes up to Jesus and says, "Good teacher." And Jesus' first response is, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but the Father." That's Jesus who said that. Honest valuation of yourself. You want a good way to see the world? Realize, I know this might shatter you, realize you're not perfect. It's a good way to start. Now that's the first one. The second one is the object of great faith. The centurion says, "Lord, just say the word and my servant will be healed." Notice the confidence in that statement. Just say the word and my servant will be healed. Now to understand this, we need to understand what a centurion is. A centurion was the backbone of the Roman military machine. He was the leader of a reality we'll get to now. But he was the backbone of what made the Roman military machine great. And it was the greatest in the world. They were almost unchallenged at this particular time. And obviously the word centurion shares a root with our English word century, right? Which means 100 years. So obviously, a centurion led how many men? Exactly 80 people. I know, I also didn't get it. It's really weird. But that's how many they led. They led about 80 people, 80 men. And they led these people with absolute authority. In fact, the authority that they had was so within their power that if they suffered a humiliating defeat, the centurion had every right, the state backed him on this, that he could go to his century, his 80 men, again, and decimate them. Now, when we think of decimate, we think, what? Utterly destroyed. The word literally means 1 in 10. They would go through and they would systematically kill every 10th soldier. They would decimate the century. Why? Because he had absolute authority. This is what the centurion was leading on. He knew what power meant. If Caesar said something, he did it. And if he said something, his men did it. If Caesar said something, his men did it because he told his men to do it, even if it was to decimate them. Absolute authority. He knew power and understood in the moment that Jesus had power. This is what he believed. And so the power of his faith, church, came from the object of his faith. The fact that he believed God could do this. And this contrasts another faith we have today, what I'm going to title the Disney faith. You know, you will see miracles if you believe. He has also been subject to the Prince of Egypt. Just hang on, when you have kids you will. It's a great movie actually. But you know, just believe and you'll see miracles, right? It's the power of belief. Clap your hands and a fairy gets wings. Really believe. Unfortunately, that doesn't cut it. And in fact, sometimes it's really stupid. Because think about it. Stalin really believed in Marxist economic theory. and it resulted in the death of some 80 million people. He really believed. Didn't make him right. But he really believed. In fact, I'm going to steal or borrow a story that Tim Keller tells. I think it's such a great one. Of two men standing on a ledge, an extremely high ledge. And they sit in, they know they're going to fall, and there's just a rock outlet just in front of them. And there's two rocks, and the first guy is absolutely terrified. He knows he has to jump because there's wind blowing, and he's going to fall off this tight edge. He has to jump, and so he picks a rock. He's terrified. He doesn't know if this rock's going to hold him, but he jumps, and he lands, and he's safe. And so the second friend sees this. He's emboldened. He's like all faith in the world. He's like, I'm going to, I've seen it happen. I'm safe now. He jumps and he lands on the second rock. And what he doesn't know is there's a faint crack in that rock. And it breaks and he falls to his death. Now, the story illustrates something very obvious that we all know. It has no basis on how much you believe, but what you believe in, right? If you believe in rubbish, reality is going to hit you like a 10-ton truck. You can believe with all your heart that the rock is going to hold you. If it's got a crack in it, reality is going to hit you with the force of, and who knows the fall ratio? What's it? 1.3 meters per second, I think, eh? Now, come on, scientists in our group, come on. It doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter how much we believe, it matters what we believe in. The centurion's faith was not in his capacity to believe, but in the capacity of God. He knew God could do it. He knew that Jesus was on the authority of God, and that was his faith. It had nothing to do with the strength of his faith, and everything to do with the object that the centurion put his trust on. So the second point tonight is great faith is orientated around and dependent on truth. God's truth. God is ultimately true. That's the second point. The third thing we see is the boldness of great faith. And this is the fascinating paradox of this passage. I love it. Because the centurion comes off and he's like, Lord, I am not worthy. I am worthless. Don't even come to me. And yet, he's like, but if you say it, it's done. There's a paradox of humility and boldness. I mean, we've covered him, his humility. He was not worthy to even bother Jesus. And at the same time, he's like, Lord, if you say it's done, it's done. And this is the paradox of the Christian faith. The gospel. This is the paradox of the gospel. The gospel shows us how undeserving we are, and at the same time teaches us that we are the delight of God. That God is for us and not against us. It's an inherent paradox that's sold only in the gospel. Because the gospel teaches us that we are sinners, right? That we need help. We need salvation. However, in what Christ has done, the same gospel transports us and says, because of Christ, we are the very delight of God. How God loves us with every fiber of his being. In fact, he loves us so much that he died for us. He loves us so much that he gives for us. And that's the inherent paradox of the gospel faith. If you believe in the gospel, you cannot come to God with denying your sin. You cannot say, God has to accept me. Then you haven't believed in the gospel. If you say, God has to accept me as I am, in my sin and just living any way I want to, the death of Jesus means nothing. Why did he die then? If God just has to accept you, why did Jesus die? The gospel forces us to realize we are sinners and have fallen short of God's glory. And at the same time, because of what Christ has done, in Christ we are unbelievably accepted. Unbelievably accepted. And that translates instantly to a boldness about life that no one else can get. You can't get this in any other religion. You can't get this in any other like self-help guide or guru or whatever you know. It's a confidence, a boldness without arrogance. And it's a humility without self-deprecation. You're at the same time humbled and exalted. And so you do approach life with this sense of boldness. Not an arrogant boldness, but a sense of assurance, knowing that if you fail, well, yeah, I'm a sinner, right? I'm going to mess it up. But in the same time, I know in all things what? Therefore that God is working all things together for good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. That's boldness. And so great faith releases us. It makes us bold about our lives. It makes us bold about what we're doing in the world and our place in the world. But it makes us humble because it's all because of Jesus. It's all because of what Christ has done for us. It's God who's working both in and through us according to His good purposes, right? Humility and boldness. And so we will see unbelievable things and be drawn into unbelievable things. Things far beyond what we ever expected of ourselves. Do we deserve that? Of course not. That's the gospel. But God gives us as a gift. Boldness and humility. Great faith both humbles us and exalts us at the same time. And so I think it gives us a boldness to face the world. But that boldness is not tied to us. And so it lacks that insecurity that leads to arrogance. You know why people are arrogant? It's because deep down, they terrify. It's bravado. It's making up for the fact that they are unwilling to accept the truth of the world, which is that we don't measure up. The gospel confronts us with this reality, doesn't it? You see how great faith actually grounds you in the very world you live. You are called, just throw this out there. You are called to do unbelievable things, but not in your strength. You see how the world twists that? You're special. You can do whatever you want. Nothing can stop you. No one should question you. It leaves you flaying about because really, who are you? Why are you special? The gospel comes and says, no. What you feel about yourself is true. You are the delight of God, but not because you deserve it. Because God has made you it. It's a gift. And so all of life is seen like that. All of life is seen as a gift. And that will carry you into things that you would never believe that you would do. Things that you cannot understand now. Things that you don't want to understand now. If God told me when I first was saved that I would be here where I am now, I would have been like, I'm out. Thank you. That sounds like too much effort. Right? And I look back and I just look at the mess that I've made and how God has every step said, not this, you're going too far, let's go back. I'm going to carry you to where I want you to be and use you for my glory. You are my child. And I look at it and I say, but I'm not worthy. And He says, absolutely. But I've made you worthy in Christ. I've chosen you And you know why I've chosen you? Because I've chosen you. There's no other reason. I'm not worthy to God except for the fact that He chose me. There's nothing inherently wonderful that God can use me. He can do it in anyone else. If God can choose a donkey, He can use me. He's chosen me. And He's chosen you. And so He shifts us. He shifts our worldview and our presupposition from being all about us and all about what we can do and all about what we can achieve to the one who actually is the reason for creation. Notice Jesus never denies the centurion man's faith. Who was the centurion man's faith in? It's in Jesus. It's in Jesus. And that's what Jesus wants to be with you. He wants to be the bottom reality of your life. How you make sense of the world. And you know how He gives it to us? You know how He shifts our worldview? Through a gift of Himself. You can't help but have faith. You can't. You can't live in the world without faith. So I want to challenge you tonight. What is the object of your faith? And is it great enough to carry you through this world? Let's pray.